For the final weeks in the ethics class, we are touching on things that we've already begun to touch upon. In the civil disobedience section, we talked about things that could relate to bringing up issues that we might feel strongly about, that might prompt us to want to engage in civil disobedience, or at which point we might excuse civil disobedience in different ways. One of those issues in the history of our country here in the United States has been the issue of race, and we tackle that head on in our readings for this week, including race and gender issues, as well as affirmative actions and other kinds of things that should be done. These can be controversial issues. They are high in the news right now, perhaps never more so than because we have our first African American president elected. Just recently, the new Attorney General has also prompted discussion by talking about our inability to talk about racial issues in the United States. Hillary Clinton in her campaign, Sarah Palin in her campaign, raised the issue of gender for the United States. And can we really see a woman in the highest office? And if not, why not? We have one woman on the Supreme Court, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who is not feeling well right now. She's just had surgery for pancreatic cancer. But if she were to either retire from the bench or she were to pass away, would we automatically replace her with another woman? The answer for Sandra Day O'Connor when she stepped down was no, we won't. But if we didn't replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg, then we would have no women on the court. So did that seat become, by default, a woman's seat? These are some issues you might think about as you're reading through the different pieces. We have a piece on Brown versus Board of Education, which was a hallmark case in the history of the United States. But what it did was it overturned another court case called Plessy versus Ferguson. Once upon a time in our country's history, the idea of separate but equal was not only thought okay, it was enshrined in law as perfectly acceptable. And that persisted for several generations until Brown versus Board of Education came along and said separate but equal is inherently unequal. As we think about things like that with regard to race, we might also think about that in other contexts too, because there are still many different ways of discriminating against people in our country, and there are many ways that we need to work around that. On the other hand, we have always had the idea of liberty in our country as being one of the paramount virtues, one of the things that we want to instill in people as a civic virtue, and one of the things that we want to preserve as part of our legal structure. Do things like affirmative action, do things like reparations, impact on that in a negative sense. The idea of reparations was perhaps more important in the media before the economic collapse. Right now, perhaps no one has any money for any kind of reparations. So you might not see too many discussions of that right now. But they have popped up again and again, both with regard to the issue of slavery, as well as the issue of other peoples, such as Native Americans, who were displaced from their lands, many times not in a favorable way to their communities, and also to more recent happenings like the Japanese Americans and the German Americans. Not a lot of people realize that German Americans too were sometimes interned during World War II. So I invite you to look at those issues. For the final week, the discussion board is extra credit. It's optional, so you don't have to do it. But some of the readings for that week will also impact the final exam. We talk about family values and just what family values are. We don't live in a society where most of us grew up in, most of us do not have any longer, the kind of leave it to beaver, mother stays at home and father goes out to work and kids never get into any more trouble than chewing gum in class or skipping the occasional class in school. There are a lot of other issues that are going on in the world. Issues such as homosexuality, polygamy, which has become more of an issue lately with different kinds of sectarian groups in the South, some derivative of the Mormon Church, some not. Different kinds of arrangements where people live together without being married, have children without being married. That would have been unheard of even just a generation ago as a standard practice, and now it's becoming far more common. So there are different kinds of things that we can look at in terms of family value. What really constitutes a family? And what should constitute a family? What should our society be encouraging? What should our society be tolerating? Are these, in fact, the appropriate questions to be asking? If we value liberty, should society be doing anything with regard to it? So I invite you to think about those things as you read through our readings for the last few weeks, and I look forward to reading what you have to say on the boards.